the top 7 actors John Wayne secretly loathed. Behind the towering frame and all-American swagger of John Wayne, the silver screen's most legendary cowboy, lurked a man with a list. Not a script, not a prop, but a mental blacklist of actors he flat-out despised. Though he was the epitome of professionalism on set, gruff, stoic, and seemingly unbothered, those close to him knew better. That list was real, one longtime assistant director revealed. Once your name was on it, you were done. Wayne, an Oscar-winning box office giant and symbol of rugged masculinity, held deep grudges behind the scenes. He didn't just avoid certain co-stars, he worked actively to keep them out of future productions. What's truly shocking is how well he masked it all. On screen, he was the ultimate team player. But behind closed doors, he was strategic, unflinching, and sometimes ruthless. These weren't petty arguments, they were legendary feuds that quietly shaped Hollywood history. As you watch the classics, you'd never suspect the burning animosity smoldering behind that cold stare. Get ready to uncover the 7 names that made John Wayne's blood boil, secrets he took to the grave, but left behind in every frame. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift, the method actor who shook John Wayne to his core. John Wayne wasn't just Hollywood's toughest cowboy, he was the face of rugged American masculinity. So when Montgomery Clift, a young, brooding method actor, stepped onto the set of Red River in 1948, it wasn't just a clash of acting styles, it was a cultural collision. Clift's quiet intensity and emotional vulnerability stood in stark contrast to Wayne's straight-shooting bravado. According to film historians, their feud wasn't about ego, it was about what American manhood looked like on screen. The tension ignited even before cameras rolled. Wayne reportedly scoffed, "Can't you find someone who actually looks like he's worked cattle?" Clift, unfazed, shot back, "Maybe I'll just act like I can. Isn't that the point?" As filming progressed, Clift's constant probing into his character's psyche and his demands for script rewrites clashed with Wayne's old-school philosophy. Memorize your lines, hit your mark, and don't overthink it. Things finally boiled over during a key scene. Frustrated, Wayne exploded, "For Christ's sake, it's a Western, not a visit to the head shrinker, just say the damn lines." But beneath the anger was something deeper: fear. Wayne privately admitted Clift's performance was electrifying. In that moment, the Duke faced a terrifying truth. Audiences might be ready for a new kind of man on screen, one who felt, questioned, and bled from the inside. That realization hardened Wayne. He doubled down on the old ways, rejecting scripts with psychological nuance and blackballing casting directors who championed method actors. Though Red River became a classic, the two never worked together again. And when asked years later about Clift, Wayne's voice was cold, "Talented. Sure. But he helped destroy what American acting used to stand for." Kirk Douglas, the Hollywood rebel who defied John Wayne's America. The feud between Kirk Douglas and John Wayne wasn't just another Hollywood clash of egos, it was a battle for the soul of America. These two towering icons stood on opposite ends of a cultural and political divide so deep, it turned every potential collaboration into a standoff. They didn't just see America differently, recalled one director who worked with both. They were different Americas. Their conflict exploded during the height of the Hollywood blacklist. While Wayne championed the anti-communist crusade sweeping through the industry, Douglas made a bold and dangerous move. He hired blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo to write Spartacus and proudly gave him screen credit. It was a defiant gesture that shook the town. Wayne saw it as a betrayal. "It was like spitting in the face of everyone trying to protect this country," said a producer close to the Duke. From that moment on, Wayne wouldn't even attend events where Douglas was being honored. Tensions reached a boiling point when both men were considered for the Alamo, a passion project for Wayne. When Douglas expressed interest, Wayne gave the studio an ultimatum: "Either he's out, or I'm out. And it's my money behind this picture." Wayne not only starred in the film, he directed it, ensuring Douglas was nowhere near the set. Their hatred ran so deep that entire scripts for major westerns in the 1960s had to be rewritten just to keep them apart. What began as a political disagreement morphed into a bitter vendetta that outlived their box office glory. "They were America's culture war before we even had a name for it," said a film historian. Their rivalry wasn't just about roles or scripts, it was about the very future of the nation they helped define on screen. Marlon Brando. The revolutionary John Wayne could never forgive. Marlon Brando and John Wayne never shared a screen, But that didn't stop a deep and bitter feud from boiling between them. For Wayne, Brando wasn't just an actor. He was the symbol of everything going wrong in Hollywood and America. The mumbling, the rebellion, the politics, recalled one producer. Brando stood for everything Duke despised. Their clash began when Brando's raw, electrifying performance in A Streetcar Named Desire introduced method acting to the mainstream, a style Wayne considered narcissistic and disrespectful. But it was Brando's activism that made the rift personal. In 1973, when Brando refused his Oscar for The Godfather, sending Native American activist Sachin Littlefeather in his place to protest Hollywood's mistreatment of indigenous people, it was more than just a political statement. It was a direct blow to the Westerns that had built Wayne's legacy. Duke was livid, recalled one Academy insider. He had to be physically held backstage. He kept shouting, "He's insulting every film I've ever made." Wayne fired back in Playboy, defending his portrayals and calling Brando a fool who disrespected the industry's highest honor. Brando didn't flinch. He hit back, saying Wayne was the perfect example of everything wrong with America. Their feud was more than personal, it was symbolic. Wayne and Brando embodied two clashing visions of manhood, of patriotism, of storytelling itself. Old Hollywood versus New Hollywood. Tradition versus revolution. They were never just different actors, said a director who knew them both. They were different Americas. And that's why they could never, ever work together. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood versus the Duke. Behind the flashing cameras and red carpet smiles, a fierce rivalry simmered, one that pitted two of Hollywood's greatest legends against each other, Clark Gable and John Wayne. Though the public never saw it, their tension shaped the paths they walked and the roles they fought to claim. This was classic alpha male turf war, recalled a casting director from the era. Two top dogs who refused to share the same yard. The feud began when Wayne was still grinding through low-budget B-westerns, while Gable reigned as Hollywood royalty. Studio insiders say Wayne auditioned for multiple roles that ultimately went to Gable, sparking a deep-seated resentment that smoldered for years. But it wasn't until World War II that the rivalry truly ignited. While Gable, already past draft age, enlisted and flew real combat missions with the Army Air Forces, Wayne stayed in Hollywood, protected by studio influence and a family deferment. Still, the whispers never stopped. Why wasn't the Duke in uniform like Gable? Duke hated being compared to Gable's war record, a close friend once shared. He already carried guilt about not serving. Having Gable's bravery constantly thrown in his face, that was like rubbing salt into an open wound. The tension only grew. By the 1950s, as Wayne's star soared and Gable's began to fade, they were both eyed for the lead in Magambo, 1953. According to legend, Wayne told director John Ford flat out, "It's him or me." Ford chose Gable, but never worked with him again. Their rivalry ended not with a confrontation, but with a tragedy. In 1960, after performing his own punishing stunts in The Misfits, Gable suffered a fatal heart attack. Upon hearing the news, Wayne reportedly murmured to a friend, "This business kills all of us in the end. Even kings." And yet, despite decades of animosity, Wayne quietly attended Gable's funeral. He stood at the back, stone-faced, silent, paying his final respects to the one man he never liked, but couldn't help but respect. Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman, the new Hollywood threat John Wayne refused to tolerate. The bitter tension between John Wayne and Gene Hackman wasn't just a clash of egos, it was a battle between two eras of Hollywood. Wayne, the towering symbol of old-school heroism, saw Hackman as a direct threat to everything he stood for. Hackman represented the fall of the white hat, recalled a director who had worked with both men. He brought in the age of anti-heroes, moral ambiguity, and gritty realism, everything Wayne despised. Their feud reached a boiling point after The French Connection in 1971. Hackman's Oscar-winning turn as Popeye Doyle, a foul-mouthed, morally conflicted detective, didn't just win critical acclaim, it shattered the old mold of what a cinematic hero could be. Wayne reportedly walked out of a screening and later scoffed to friends, "That's not a hero. That's a disgrace. If that's the future of movies, count me out." But it got even more personal. During pre-production for The Train Robbers, 1973, Wayne exploded when he heard Hackman was being considered for a supporting role. He issued an ultimatum to the producers, "Either he goes, or I do." I won't share the screen with someone who confuses my audience about what a man's supposed to be. For Wayne, this wasn't just about one actor. It was about the collapse of the very foundation he'd built his legacy on: clear-cut morality, rugged masculinity, and good guys who always wore the white hat. But America was changing. Vietnam, Watergate, disillusionment. Audiences craved flawed, human characters, and Hackman delivered exactly that. He took it as a personal attack, said one of Wayne's co-stars. To him, Hackman and his kind were tearing down the very soul of Hollywood. Their feud wasn't just two men locked in mutual disdain, it was a symbol of a brutal shift in storytelling, from the mythic to the messy. And as the new Hollywood rose, Wayne stood like a lone cowboy in the dust, honorable, proud, and painfully out of time. Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall, the authentic cowboy who threatened John Wayne's legacy. Of all the rivalries that marked the twilight of John Wayne's legendary career, none struck deeper than his simmering disdain for Robert Duvall. It wasn't just a clash of egos, it was a clash of philosophies. Wayne embodied westerns, but Duvall lived them. Wayne played a cowboy. Duvall became one, recalled a costume designer who worked with both. And that distinction cut deep. Their friction first sparked during pre-production for True Grit, 1969, when both were considered for major roles. But when Wayne caught wind of Duvall's intense method acting, living with real Texas Rangers to study their accents, gestures, and way of life, he shut it down. He called it showing off, said an assistant director. Duke scoffed, "We're making a movie, not a documentary. Nobody cares if he can actually rope a steer." That decision left a lasting mark, and the resentment never faded. Years later, Duvall's legendary turn in Lonesome Dove, 1989, hit like a thunderclap. Though Wayne had already passed, Duvall's performance was everything Wayne's characters were not: raw, regionally accurate, and steeped in emotional truth. When asked about Wayne's legacy during interviews, Duvall didn't hold back. "Those movies were about as authentic as a $3 bill," he said bluntly. Wayne played the same man in the same hat for 40 years. For historians, the tension revealed something more profound: the end of an era. Wayne had built a myth, larger than life, heroic, untouchable. But Duvall ushered in a new vision, one where cowboys had flaws, dialects, and depth. Wayne saw the writing on the wall, one film scholar noted. Duvall proved that westerns didn't have to sacrifice truth for spectacle, and that threatened everything the Duke stood for. In the end, it was a one-sided feud. Duvall moved the genre forward. Wayne, until his dying breath, resented the man who dared to out-authenticate the cowboy king. Clint Eastwood, the successor John Wayne refused to crown. In the sprawling saga of Hollywood's golden age, few rivalries cut as deep, or as symbolic, as the Cold War between John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. This wasn't just about egos or stardom. It was a battle for the very soul of the American Western, and what it meant to be a hero. To many, Clint Eastwood was the natural heir to Wayne's throne, the rugged, silent cowboy of a new era. But to Wayne, Eastwood was something far worse: a threat. Not to his legacy, but to everything he believed the Western stood for. This wasn't just about territory, one producer recalled. This was about America. The rift began in the 1960s with Eastwood's breakout in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. Gone were the noble gunslingers Wayne had immortalized. In their place stood Eastwood's cold-eyed, morally ambiguous drifter, a man who shot first, asked nothing, and carried a shadow as heavy as his holster. To Wayne, these weren't heroes. They were desecrations. After watching A Fistful of Dollars, Wayne reportedly sent Eastwood a scathing letter, accusing him of tarnishing the Western's dignity for a few bucks more. As Eastwood's fame rose, Wayne's health began to falter. Still, the tension simmered. In 1973, Eastwood extended an olive branch, sending Wayne the script for High Plains Drifter, hoping to collaborate. But Wayne didn't just say no. He sent the script back with a furious note, condemning its vision of the Old West as corrupt and morally bankrupt. "I'd rather die than help destroy the Western," he told friends. Their feud boiled over in public at a Hollywood function later that decade. An ailing Wayne allegedly confronted Eastwood, growling, "That Italian fellow didn't do you any favors, made you a shadow of a man. A Western hero is supposed to represent something good." But here lies the bitter irony. As Eastwood aged, he didn't abandon the Western, he refined it. His 1992 film Unforgiven won 4 Oscars and reshaped the genre into something haunting, profound, and painfully human. It honored the tradition Wayne cherished, even as it laid bare the lies behind it. In the end, Eastwood didn't destroy the Western, he saved it. He carried it forward into a world where heroes weren't perfect, and justice wasn't always clean. Wayne couldn't accept that evolution. He saw it as betrayal. But the audience saw truth. Wayne's refusal to acknowledge Eastwood as his successor was more than pride. It was his last stand against a changing world, a world where the white-hat cowboy was no longer enough. But as we look back on Wayne's legendary feuds, with Montgomery Clift, Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Kirk Douglas, it becomes clear that these weren't just personal vendettas. They were ideological battles, reflections of a man fighting to preserve a vision of America that was fading before his eyes. In the twilight of his life, John Wayne became a relic, respected, revered, but increasingly out of sync with the art form he once defined. As method acting, moral ambiguity, and revisionist storytelling took center stage, Wayne stood his ground, against time itself. Yet despite his resistance, his influence endures. Even the actors he clashed with, Eastwood, Hackman, Duvall, acknowledged the trail he blazed. His legacy wasn't erased by the feuds. It was sharpened by them. Because only legends spark battles worth fighting. If this glimpse behind the curtain of Hollywood's greatest icons moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories hidden behind the fame. Drop a comment below. Which revelation surprised you the most? And which legend's untold story should we explore next? Until then, remember, some of Hollywood's most gripping dramas were never written in scripts, they were lived.